Welcome to Practice Diary. So I want to talk about the diminished scale. A lot of people think of this as being advanced harmony, but it really isn't. It's very, very simple because the diminished scale is what we call a symmetrical scale, meaning that it's just got a very limited number of intervals that just repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. So a diminished scale is simply just a half tone and a whole tone. And you just repeat half tone, whole tone, half tone, whole tone, half tone, whole tone, all the way up. So there's only two different ways that you could play a diminished scale. You can either start with the half tone or you can start with the whole tone. So if you're starting with a half tone, it will go from the root note, half tone, whole tone, 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 etc., etc., etc. It just carries on and on and on and on and on, hence symmetrical. So it gives you a lot of patterns, just repeating patterns that you can play. So it's quite nice and easy to play on, stuff like this. Okay, so it's just repeating patterns. That's all it is. It's just the same intervals over and over and over again. But it creates quite an interesting sound, and this is where we come to the application of it. Like, how do you actually use the diminished scale in jazz? And it most commonly gets used on dominant seventh chords. So if we think of our chord as being B flat 7, now if we play a diminished scale starting on the root note, starting with a half tone, it gives us an interesting sequence of what I would call inside and outside notes. So starting on the B flat, the root note, we would then get a flat 9, a sharp 9, which are both outside notes, major third, which is an inside note, it's a chord tone. Then you'd have sharp 11, or you can call it flat 5 if you want. Then the natural 5, which is another chord tone, so that's another inside note. Then you get the 13th, which is a chord extension, but it's an inside note. Dominant 7th, so that's also a chord tone, and then you're back to the root again. So you've got all of the chord tones in there, so it works very well on a dominant 7th chord, but you've also got these outside notes, and it creates some interesting sounds when you play it on dominant 7th chords. And another thing that I like to do is to mix together that kind of quite out there sounding diminished scale with the more kind of the more obvious blues scale, I suppose. So you can think of B flat blues scale, and you can create some really interesting lines by mixing up those kind of uncomfortable diminished sounds with the kind of more conventional bluesy sound of the blues scale. Let me show you what I mean by playing a blues.